today regarding reorganizations being undertaken by Tigray's armed forces and unsustained claims by the Ethiopian government regarding the conduct of Tigrayan forces. The statement highlighted that Tigray's armed forces are currently undertaking readjustments which have resulted in its forces' withdrawal from certain areas in Afar and Amhara region, and that the Ethiopian government is attempting to falsely claim it has gained through military victory. The statement also addressed false claims by Ethiopian governments and its media outlets regarding the conduct of Tigray's armed forces. The statement guaranteed by the Tigrayan government's commitment to accountability in the event of an independent and internationally led investigations into atrocities. International White Ribbon Day was commemorated in Tigray for 16th time this year. The theme of sexual violence brings shame on the offender, not on the survivors. As part of this year's annual celebrations, Bureau for the Women's Affairs, Bureau of Communication and Tigray Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Assessments and Rehabilitation Committee held a panel discussion to discuss the impact of sexual violence on survivors and the role that different actors can play. Reporter Sablor Glama has more on this.
The year-long conflict has seen the bodies of women turned into battlefields as Ethiopian and Eritrean forces have used rape as a weapon of war. Gang rape, sexual enslavement, assault, deliberate attempts to damage women's reproductive organs have not only repeatedly been documented, but have been a clear indication of the genocidal intent of invading forces in Tigray. The Bureau of Women's Affairs on Tuesday, December 7th, in coordination with the Bureau of Communication and Tigray Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Assessment and Rehabilitation Committee, commemorated the International White Ribbon Day with a panel discussion on sexual violence in conflict. Tigray is celebrating 16 days of activism under the theme Sexual Violence Brings Shame on its offenders, not the survivors. International White Ribbon Day is usually held on 25th November, which marks 16 days of action to end violence against women, which is being celebrated internationally under the theme of All Men Can. Religious leaders, health professionals, legal experts, and people from different professions participated in the panel discussion. One of the participants is Father Tu'um Barha from Catholic Church Nativity of Mariam Maqala and board member of Interreligious Council of Tigray. He has this to say about the importance of religious leaders in protecting the survivors of sexual violence.
Humanity has been violated in Tigrayan female from 5 years old babies up to 90 years old elderly. So it is not simply a war crime. It is genocide, ethnic cleansing. So the world should speak up and said enough is enough. The World Women Association, World Human Rights Association, it is time to stand up and talk.
Kochab Gabru is a mental health professional in Aidar Referral Hospital and a member of Tigray's Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Assessment and Rehabilitation Committee. She says that everyone has the responsibility to echo the voice of survivors whose suffering has been exacerbated due to the ongoing siege.
Shout and make our voices heard, and for also speak for the survivors that have been double victimized by what's going on in Tigray. Not only did they survive rape or the horrific acts of sexual and gender-based violence, but now, due to the siege that's going on in Tigray, they are not able to access health care, and also to just have their basic needs met, and also to seek the justice that they so deserve. Even if they wanted to seek help, there is a lack of transportation, there's closures of banks, there is lack of trained professional, and we cannot provide capacity building. I think a lot of advocacy work needs to be done. This is not political. Asking for basic needs and asking for your rights to seek health and to get services, this is something that everyone should do, and actors in this area have to be vocal about it.
Mebrahtu Haftu is an assistant professor at Aider Comprehensive Specialized Referral Hospital. And Tigist Araya is the head of research and community service at Maqala University, as well as a female activist. They are both part of a research team, and they say they have been tasked with the responsibility of studying the effect of war on survivors of sexual violence, but say this task...
Since the Tigray government retook its governance, the Ethiopian government especially changed its tactic and to blockage, as well as the violence is also continuing in the unfreed areas in eastern Tigray, northwest, as well as in the western Tigray. So, especially in these 3 months, we are looking for solutions to halt this de facto blockage, which is termed by United Nations.
So when we discuss about them, the sexual and gender-based violence survivors of Tigray war are double victims. They have been sexually abused, and there have been a lot of atrocities. And following that, the siege also had its own effect, and they were not able to get help. They were not coming to seek help because of a lot of factors, as we all know. There was no transportation. They were prevented from accessing help, and now there are also other factors after the government of Tigray came back to the power. So this double victimization has to be stopped.
Leta Brahan is a resident of Indarta district, southeastern zone Tigray. She is one of the victims of sexual violence by the Eritrean soldiers, and she expresses her agony as follows. She says that there is very little awareness about the harm that is caused due to sexual violence. There are blankets and 3 mobile phones of me and my children's. There are also clothes there, and they took all of it. I don't really care about my clothes being taken, but my golds are very important to me. That's why I didn't sell them at even most desperate times. Then they put it into a sack, and then one of the soldiers beat me with his foot, and then he raped me first, and the others followed up and did the same to me. Leta Brahan's agony did not end here. She also said that she had been gang raped by Ethiopian soldiers as well, while she was going to a mourning house where her brother and 3 of her relatives were killed by Ethiopian soldiers. My hair was cut short then, and they accused me of being junta. I said I was not, and that they can see my ID. Then they asked where I was going, and I told them that I was going into a mourning house. Then they asked to tell them the details, but I told them I was going there now, and that I don't know anything. But I only say that because I was afraid of them. Then they kept on accusing me of being a junta. After that, they forced me out of the car that I was in, and made me stay there alone until 10 in the evening. Then Abiy soldiers took me to their place, and they all raped me. I couldn't really know how many they were, because at some point in midnight, I was unconscious. Then at 9 in the morning, they picked me up and took me to a bus station, which also serves as a checkpoint. Then they carried me into a trunk and took me elsewhere. Zafu is another victim raped when she was coming to Maqala along with other women by 3 Eritrean soldiers. She also has this to say.
There were 2, and they came with weapons. I was in a truck that carried walia beer. They told us to go out. When I did and gave them my ID, they said that they don't want that. I had a smartphone. He snatched it away from me, and he took my purse. I had 5,000 birr in there. Then there was an empty minibus there, and they told me and another girl to get inside that minibus. Then they used tape to cover our mouths, and used rope to tie our hands, and used fabric to cover our eyes. Then we went very far away. Then one of them held a knife and told me to get out. Then I was scared and went without him. Then the 3 other soldiers came following us. He put me inside a house, and they all raped me, one by one.
Tigray's Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Assessment and Rehabilitation Committee members also say that they are doing all they can to support the survivors. However, the ongoing siege has made it impossible to provide the necessary medical care for patients or properly track and work to retain evidence of sexual violence in Tigray.
The 8-month-long occupation of Tigray by the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces was preceded by hostile takeover that included the indiscriminate shelling and mass killings of the innocent civilians. Aksum, a historical city in central Tigray, is just one of the many cities heavily bombarded by Ethiopian forces. This just days ahead of Aksum's massacre that saw the deaths of hundreds of civilians in a house-to-house killing rampage that lasted 2 days. Reporter Salamit Khaleh has more on this.
Many residents of the northern west and western parts of Tigray had fled from their homes following the invasion and inhuman mass killings of Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. Tsiga Alamshet, a resident of Adidaro, a village 90 kilometers from Aksum, had sent her family to Aksum, hoping they would be safe from the soldiers in her hometown. But on the day of November 19, 2020, Ethiopian and Eritrean forces would start to indiscriminately shell the city of Aksum, leading to the death of many innocent civilians. Tsiga's family had been sheltered in Kasa Ankwai home in Aksum, one of the many residences completely destroyed due to the shellings.
Following the occupation of Adidaro by Eritrean forces who looted my house, I sent my family to Aksum. I made my way to Aksum on foot to join them, but I found out my aunt, my 10 and 20 years old children, and my 86 years old mother had all died.
Another resident who lost her relatives, Milita Gebratzado, speaks about how the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces not only brutally murdered civilians, but also prevented burial of their bodies.
It was a time when Aksum was being heavily bombarded. The Eritreans and Abiy soldiers entered the city firing guns at civilians. They killed many people. They even killed people who want to fetch the dead bodies.
Afwark Waldu, also a resident of Aksum, remembers the horrific day as such.
On November 10, at around 4 in the afternoon, I heard people screaming for help. When I came, there was a dead girl there. Another dead girl was in a small room over there. And there was a bed here. The 86-year-old woman was lying dead in her bed. And one little boy was also under the bed.
Aksum, home to one of the oldest civilizations in Africa, has seen many atrocities, including the Aksum massacre, that saw the killing of hundreds of civilians in a 2-day killing rampage by Eritrean forces.
The 8 months long occupation by the Ethiopian forces and their Eritrean allies has been the cause of unspeakable atrocities across Tigray. Hagar Salam, a small town just 39 kilometers from Mala, would see a gruesome massacre on December 3, 2020. Survivors and the loved ones of the victims share what unfolded last year. Aragao Garumkel has more on this.
December 3, 2020 marks a dark day for the residents of Hagar Salam as allied Ethiopian and Eritrean forces committed brutal massacre. Among those who lost members of their family to the atrocious action of the soldiers, priest Asfa Gergis lost his 2 children, killed in front of his eyes on the same day. He remembered the agonizing situation as follows.
I heard gunfire right after my children went out of house. The soldiers had not the slightest care. They killed both my children in front of my eyes. I screamed at the top of my voice and 2 people came to help me after a while and we buried them later on that day.
Atsada Gergis's husband was killed during that gruesome day. He was shot alongside his son. His son survived with a minor wound on his leg, but his father couldn't make it out alive. Atsada has this to say about that day.
They came on Friday and my husband was here at home sitting with his son. They shot at both of them. My husband died instantly and my child was wounded but survived. I was left alone with my 4-year-old child and I couldn't bury my husband's body. There was no one to help me. I spent the whole day in grief and dismay and was able to bury him the next day.
Leblam Gabrametin also lost her husband on the same day. Her husband was brutally murdered in his own home by the savage troops. Leblam has this to say about it.
My husband used to work as a school guard. He spent the whole week at work. They killed him when he came home to rest on Friday.
The Hagar Salam massacre is just one of the many atrocities committed in Tigray that yet to be investigated and perpetrators to be held accountable. Just one of the many places where the longing and cry for justice is yet to be heard.
According to the UN, 5.3 million Tigrayans are in dire need of humanitarian assistance, and nearly 1 million are facing famine-like conditions. The almost 5-month-long siege on Tigray that has discontinued all banking services, food aid, and medical supplies continues to exacerbate an already dire humanitarian assistance situation. Here are the details. This mother is called Damakash Tafara. She is unable to lactate and breastfeed her child due to the malnourishment that she has encountered over the past year as a result of the intentional use of hunger as a weapon of war by the Ethiopian and Eritrean troops over Tigrayans. Damakash, who is now unable to get her daily meal, explains that she used to clean for living. However, due to the all-encompassing siege and blockade of food aid casted upon Tigrayans, she couldn't find any paying job, and that she and her child are suffering from severe hunger to the extent of not being able to sleep.
I used to clean for a living until this war broke out. Now we are in a very difficult position. Maybe some people who are in a relatively better condition than us might be able to help us out. If we don't get help anytime soon, our situation could turn to be life-threatening. I only breastfeed her. She is 2 years old, yet she doesn't get any other additional food. I don't have any alternative food that I can afford to buy her.
Alam Dasaling, a mother who used to support her whole family and even help others, is now facing severe starvation due to the man-made famine used against Tigrayans.
I used to support myself and my family. I used to pay rent, but now, let alone paying a rent, I can't even buy food for my children. I can't bear hearing my children screaming, "Give us food."
The victims of this man-made famine also urged for an emergent humanitarian aid and mentioned that the only way they can get by this difficult time is if they get help from others.
Helping the needy is what makes us human. There are many people who sleep empty-bellied and not share their problems with others. People who are able to help should help. We can get through this if we help each other out.
Ma'alad houses over 160,000 internally displaced persons displaced from different parts of Tigray. These IDPs mainly depend on host communities to provide them with essentials like food and clothes, support that has come to a complete halt as host communities are starting to find themselves in a desperate situation due to the ongoing siege. Vanel Muro has more on this.
Human rights abuses, attacks on Tigray's infrastructure, and the deliberate destruction of food stocks by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces has seen the displacement of over 2 million Tigrayans across different parts of Tigray. While displacement have continued to show a sharp decrease since last June, when Ethiopian and Eritrean forces withdrew from much of Tigray, the use of famine as a weapon of war has meant that many continue to be forced to leave their home in search of food and medical care.
We are displaced from different corners of Tigray. The situation is horrific. No banking and power services. The people of Tigray are under a complete siege. We need food and medical supplies. Pregnant mothers and children are dying due to the fact that humanitarian aid is blocked from entering Tigray. We are in desperate situation due to the invaders in Tigray. I cannot find my wife or my 4 children. They had nothing to eat at home. Everything was either destroyed or taken by the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces.
The 5-month-long siege that has blocked all food aid from coming into Tigray has meant that food stocks have been completely depleted, leaving very few options for IDPs to fend off hunger.
We are dying of hunger. We came here with our mother because we have nothing to eat at home. Abiy Ahmed, Ethiopian Prime Minister, and his allies have made us displaced to Mekelle. We are extremely hungry. We are drinking just 1 cup of tea and 2 breads daily. This is not enough for us. I am sheltered at this IDP center. Other members of my family are living in other similar centers across Tigray because of the war. I don't know what I can say about the hunger, let alone the children. Adults are starving too. Consequently, children, lactating mothers, and elderly are dying due to hunger.
There are over 5 million people in Tigray in need of emergency assistance, nearly 1 million in famine-like conditions, a humanitarian catastrophe that is sure to worsen if the siege should continue.
6 countries, including the United States and the United Kingdom, expressed concern over the ethnic profiling and mass detention of Tigrayans in Ethiopia. In a statement on Monday, the countries urged the Ethiopian government to cease such activities and stated that they go against the accepted international humanitarian law. Abel Tsagawu has the details.
In a joint statement on Monday, 6 countries condemned the mass detention of Tigrayans by Ethiopian authorities. The United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Denmark and the Netherlands say that they are profoundly concerned about the mass and arbitrary detention of Tigrayans across Ethiopia. The joint statement, citing international human rights groups, highlighted the arbitrary arrest and the detention of Tigrayans without due process and emphasized its concern about their holding inhumane conditions in violation of the international laws. The countries urged for Ethiopia's government to allow unhindered